What's up, guys? I want to let you know about Forged Beard Co. They exist to bring 100% all-natural beard care to freedom-loving men everywhere so that you can smell, look, and feel your bearded best. Their products are intentionally crafted to bring life to your beard and bring relief to problems like coarse, dry, itchy beards and skin irritation. They have a wide range of incredible scents to choose from, so there's something for everyone. Head to forgedbeardco.com right now and use the code in all caps Cultish to get a free bottle of beard oil when you spend over $50. Thanks, guys.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Cultish, Entering the Kingdom of the Cults. My name's Jeremiah Roberts, one of the co-hosts here. I am riding solo today on a Saturday, but I'm here with Steve Matthews. Good to have you in the studio, my friend.
Great to be around.
Awesome. So real quickly, we're going to be talking about a group that's always had a little interest in me. I've driven by maybe the Baha'i Faith. Now, I've driven by their centers, every now and then over in Scottsdale. I'm here in Arizona. I know that they had an appearance in Walter Martin's book. Besides that, I literally barely know anything about them. I know we chat back and forth. We've done some other episodes together. But so just where's the starting point? Who are, well, first of all, tell them just a little about yourself and what's your interest in the subject on the Baha'i Faith?
So I have studied cults for a long time, and I'm finally doing more and more with it. Tune in to the website, examiningthecults.com, soon to be launched. We'll be doing, there's already an examining the SCJ on Shincheonji, examining WMSCOG on the World Mission Society Church of God. Mm-hmm. Soon coming is examining the Baha'is. So watch out for that, where it'll be a whole bunch of responses and, exploration of the history and some of the problems with Baha'ism.
Yeah.
It'll all be under the rubric of examiningthecults.com, mm-hmm. under the umbrella.
Yeah.
So I have spoken, a lot on some of the more recent groups, that I'm concerned about because nobody else is doing them. So if nobody's going to do them, I have a saying, I don't want to write the 5,001st book on Mormonism when there's already 5,000 books out there. There's nothing on Burning Man or the World Mission Society Church of God or Shincheonji or the International Christian Church. These are groups that I've been super concerned about. I've studied Baha'ism for a long time, and it's definitely time to get this information on this group and many more groups, which we'll be doing on Examining the Cults. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a podcast on that as well.
Awesome.
So the official name of the Baha'is is called the Baha'i Faith. Sometimes they call it the Baha'i World Faith. Baha'i means follower of Baha'u'llah, who's the founder of the Baha'is. They're all about creating a one world religion with the Baha'is, being over everything. And you were saying about how, you don't hear about them that much. Well, here's an interesting statistic, is that outside of Christianity, the Baha'is are the most widespread religion in the planet geographically, in the sense that they're in just about every country in the world, maybe except for Vatican City, North Korea.
Yeah.
But they're the most geographically widespread outside of Christianity. I believe it's in South Carolina. They're the second biggest religion outside of Christianity. In a bunch of countries in, South America and Africa, they've also kind of got statistics like that. It's difficult to say how many members they have. They're not really always open with membership, but it's expected that there's somewhere close to 6 to 7 million people. The thing is, there's a lot of inactive members who've left the faith, or the cause, as they will say. They'll do a declaration to become a Baha'i. It's like a little pledge card they do.
Yeah.
And then they don't always send it in. Just like a Mormon, they won't always say, oh, no longer Mormon. They'll kind of be on the rolls. Well, that's kind of the case with Baha'ism a lot. There's a lot of people who obviously left there too.
Yeah. Well, just real quick, you mentioned one religion. I know one area that's just interesting, sometimes within our podcast, there'll be a documentary that'll come out, or there'll be a movie that will come out in relation to a specific cult, and we'll start getting DMs about this specific group. Well, it just so happens I started getting these videos from Rainn Wilson, aka Dwight from The Office, and he was talking, it was some interview, some podcast he was on where he's talking about the distinction between the soul and the body, and I didn't really know what to equate it with, except, it's just his own form of spirituality, I guess. But then I realized, he's actually Baha'i Faith. That's
he's
actually
so committed. I mean,
yeah.
Rainn Wilson's whole point pretty much every day is getting up to spread the Baha'i gospel. I mean, he is active in so many places and pushing it. He's got a new book out. He does podcasts. His whole point, he's very, very involved as a pretty dedicated Baha'i.
Yeah. And let me ask you this, because we're talking about the origins and the history, and I'll let you just elaborate too. And is that, I think recently one of his social media posts, he was talking about some persecuted subsects in Iran.
Right.
And specifically women. He was making a big point, sort of the human rights activist point about it. So I'm just wondering, is that connected to the history about it, or what's the starting point for that?
I mean, as you know, there's not a lot of religious freedom in Islamic countries, and the Baha'is have been terribly persecuted right from the beginning in Iran. It's pretty horrible. And Baha'is do rally to that cause. But I'll also say Rainn Wilson is not the only celebrity out there in the world of Baha'i. They have a lot of other celebrity members, as far as actors, Justin Baldoni, Carol Lombard, the old school, musicians like Andy Grammer, Seals and Croft back in the day were Baha'is. They'd be promoting a lot of that there. Vic Damone, Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, there's a whole bunch of guys back in the day, absolutely, who are the Baha'is that you might not know about. They do claim to be like the fastest growing religion in the world, but then again, like so many cults claim to be the fastest growing religion in the world. Scientology says we're the fastest, and Shincheonji and the World Mission Society Church of God, they all claim to be the fastest growing religion in the world, but they're not. So it's just a really interesting group. They say that Jesus is one of 9 great manifestations throughout history, but now we're under the era, the cycle of Baha'u'llah. Yeah. So this is like what Walter Martin would talk a lot about. We can't do a show without paying homage to Walter, right?
Of course,
it'd be wrong.
I love Uncle Wally.
We'd have to do an edit, right? So Walter would talk about who is the Jesus of Mormonism. Well, Jesus is one God out of millions of gods. God the Father had sexual relations with Mary to have Jesus. The spirit brother Lucifer, who sweat in the Garden of Gethsemane for his sins, and sometimes his blood is not enough for us, so we have to atone for our own sins through blood atonement. Who's the Jesus of the Jehovah's Witnesses? He's Michael the Archangel, the first and greatest creation of Jehovah God, who came here invisibly present in 1914. He was killed on a torture stake and then arose as an invisible spirit creature. So that's the Jesus of Jehovah's Witness. Who's the Jesus of the Baha'is? He is one of 9 great manifestations through church history. They have these 9... God acts to men in different cycles when he needs to send a revelation. So they have 9 different ones. They had Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses. They had Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, who was like the forerunner, the John the Baptist we're going to get into, of Baha'u'llah. And today we're all under Baha'u'llah.
When you say church history, is that their version of church history?
Well, it's not even what they call, they don't really use the word church, but they say in God's history. So basically They say that, all religions are from the same God. They're just basically updates. And they're all from the same religion. All religions are basically, from the same God. So God, at that one time, he sent Buddha to man to show man the way to live. And then Buddha came outdated. Then he had Jesus. Jesus got replaced by Muhammad. Muhammad's, after he was around for 1,000-some years, he got replaced by a messenger in Iran called the Bab. The Bab means gate or door in Persian, Farsi. And after that, or actually in Arabic, sorry, because there's a lot of Arabic and Farsi back and forth in Baha'is. You got to keep track. And then today, now we're under Baha'u'llah, and he is God's newest manifestation. We'll get into what manifestations are.
So in other words, this would be like on my iPhone right now. I've got my settings, and I think there's 1 or 2 updates I have to do that I've been putting off. And I'm probably just going to do the update just because I need
This is the religious update.
I'm tired of the notifications. So if I did the iOS update, there'd be the Baha'i version of going from like Islam to Christianity.
Yeah, so basically, well, it's the other way around. From Christianity to Islam, because Jesus got to get replaced by Muhammad in the new cycle, the new dispensation, and now we're under the era of Baha'u'llah. So they're an offshoot of Shia Islam. They're from Iran, which is Persia, the same thing. They call that the cradle of faith, the land. And they have suffered terrible persecution there, as we've covered. Their spiritual administrative headquarters, not in Iran, it's in Haifa, Israel. And they have a lot of, memorials, huge buildings back to those guys. The largest population of Baha'is in the world is in India, where they have about 2 million members.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many members in total?
As I said, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, somewhere around 6 to 7 million. They have beautiful temples all around the world, all those fancy buildings in Israel, and they have a really big temple outside of Chicago in Wilmette, Illinois.
Okay.
9 is a big number. 9 and 19 are huge numbers in Baha'i. It's like sacred numbers. So the Baha'i temple will have like 9 sides with 9 gardens. The number 9 appears all the time as a mystical number. We're going to come across 9 on their calendar. 19. Yeah, it's a huge thing.
What's up, everybody? It's the Super Sleuth here, and I've got a snack that you're absolutely going to want to try. It's called biltong. Never heard of it? Well, now you have. It's from farmer Bill's Provisions. It's like beef jerky, except it doesn't have any of the sugar, soy, any of the preservatives, none of that nonsense. We're not going to snap into Slim Jims today. Stuff is gross. Instead, we're going to fill our bodies with the protein and the fat that it actually needs. And this stuff is so beautiful. There's even like a nice marbling effect with it in each slice that you have. It's like having your own preserved New York steak strip. Not to mention, there's fantastic flavors, guys. There's original spicy chili, smokehouse, and my favorite right now, which is bison. All you got to do is go to their website to order. That's farmerbillsprovisions.com. And the owner of this company is a Christian who does listen to Cultish. And that is so cool. And right now, if you go to the website and at checkout, use Cultish20 in all caps, CULTISH20, you can get 20% off today. farmerbillsprovisions.com. Have a great day, guys.
So in the sense that, I mean, I'm thinking about, just from my general understanding of them, that are they sort of a spin-off then of Islam? Or does that come from
Shia Islam?
Shia Islam, okay.
Yeah. I'll just say first a few of the high level things, what they believe. Mm-hmm. We'll get into some history and really see the Islamic connection there.
Oh, interesting.
So the concept is they want a one world government. They want a one world religion, which they call, and all you conspiracy people, take off your aluminum foil hats here, but they call it the New World Order.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
My voice just got a little raspy here.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
So they're looking to establish a spiritual kind of millennial reign of the Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
They want to create this one world government. So Baha'u'llah was the founder. His name in Arabic means glory of God.
Okay.
To be a Baha'i, it's a follower of glory, follower of Baha'u'llah. That's what it means to be a Baha'i. You're following, Baha'u'llah. And one of his most famous sayings in relation to this one world government idea is, the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. That's a huge Baha'i saying you're going to hear all the time. And it really, in a sense, I mean, with this liberal age now of wokeness and unity and brotherhood and peace, I mean, a lot of those things are really good, that we love each other and everybody eliminate prejudice and all, the harmony of mankind. A lot of that's very altruistic.
Yeah.
But the spirituality behind it. So kind of in a sense is a religion for our times. It's like a United Nations kind of feel, all religions loving each other, kumbaya. It's very big at that.
That reminds me when Barack Obama was sort of becoming of age. I mean, both of us were little, so remember like when he was running for president, and even when he was a senator. I remember he was doing some speech over in Germany, even before he was president, and he said something in the sense like, "I'm coming to you as a citizen of the world," and I was like,
that could be a Baha'i sentence all day long.
That immediately just came to mind when you said that.
Yeah, I mean, whether we're into like multiculturalism, social justice.
Yeah,
we want unity of all religions, equality of men and women. One world language, one world religion. We want to push science, education. So they want all of that stuff, but there's a catch. It's got to be done under them, and then you got to be a follower of Baha'u'llah. It's not good enough just to be like a person who wants all these great causes, but you're actually buying into the spirituality. That's kind of the way to most people get in. It's not a very, I don't want to say an intellectual religion. It's a very feelings-based religious sense, because people join Baha'ism not because they have, it's like, because I'm convicted that, Jesus rose from the dead, his resurrection, I base my faith on that fact. It's more like, I like the idea of the harmony and the equality and the hyper-inclusivism.
So it'd be very congruent with the cultural aesthetic of We Are the World and Imagine.
Absolutely, all that stuff. So they have basically what they call three primary principles, and you hear this one all the time, Baha'is. And the ideas are the oneness of God, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of mankind. So basically, this the one God who's part, over all the human family, and we're all part of that one world religion, which is Baha'ism. The rest of the principles kind of fall into line with this. So there's different ways they're worded, but the ideas are the equality of men and women, the harmony of science and religion, the independent investigation into truth, huge. They want a universal compulsory education, elimination of all forms of prejudice, elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty, altruistic, but again, how's that going to happen? They want spiritual solutions to economic problems, a universal auxiliary language, like in Esperanto, like one language for all countries, and universal peace upheld by a world government, which is enforced by an international tribunal. Now, that raspy voice guy can have fun with that one.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, we're going to get into that. So they love to portray themselves as a world religion. They say, just like Christianity is a world religion, we're a world religion. Just like Buddhism or Islam, we are a religion. Even though they started like 100 some years ago, You know, it's not like, you know, Mormons will say, yeah, we're the restoration of Christianity, but they say we are a legitimate world religion. But I call cult. You know, like anybody can say that they're a world religion. Mormons say they're, you know, the Mormon, Jim Jones, whoever, they could all say that, you know, they're the real deal. But I'm calling cult here because there's cults of Christianity, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. There's cults of Hinduism, like Hare Krishna. There's cults of
the Rajneesh.
Buddhism, like Soka Gakkai, cults of Judaism, like the Kabbalah Center, cults of Islam, the Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
Is one. And these guys. So there's cults of different world religions. They all have their cults.
Hey, what's up, everyone? We love that you are enjoying our content on a weekly basis, but this program cannot continue and wouldn't be possible without your support. So if you want to go to thecultistshow.com, there is a donate tab. You can either support us one time or you can become a monthly partner with us. That will allow us to continue this program, allow us to continue to be salt and light to the kingdom of the cults. So please go to thecultistshow.com/donate and you can support us one time or monthly. Also, make sure you check out our merchandise store. Go to shopcultish.com. You can see all of our great designs. A lot of you have gotten merchandise from us already. So again, either go to shopcultish.com and check out all the awesome merch. Back to the show. Yeah, one distinction that just sticks out to me is that even in the conversations that I've had with Muslims, that they're very sincere and they're very passionate about their beliefs, but they're not. They're exclusivists. They are very. I always appreciate their upfronts. Like, you're wrong. Like,
they draw a hard line.
Yeah, they draw a hard line. But it's very interesting when this is a branch off. It seems that if you're a branch off of Islam, you'd be making your own hard lines. Versus at least the appeal to this is that they're saying we're all sort of one. We're all kind of one and the same.
We're going to go to the back of the book here. And
it's like a pendulum swing.
Here's a spoiler. Baha'is kind of talk out of two sides of their mouth. On one sense, they're saying, come to us. You can continue to be a Christian and a Baha'i. Yeah. You can continue to be a Jew and a Baha'i. You can be part of this religion where we embrace everybody. But at the end of the day, you have to believe in, you know, Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, the Universal House of Justice. You have to kind of give over to that and then not embrace what you did anymore. You can't believe when Baha'is deny the bodily resurrection of Jesus, you can no longer hold on to that as a Christian. Now you have to adopt the Baha'i view, which we'll explain.
So in other words, you would have to, what they would say is that it's syncretistic. You can syncretize it with any
the two
religion.
Sides of the mouth.
Yeah. But when you actually, if you put the weights and measures together, it would tilt towards
Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah. Regardless of it, whether it's Hinduism,
Christianity's
Islam,
been replaced. It's done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think history is the best way to go from here.
Yeah.
To really understand it. So this part's going to be a little long, but it's going to be really valuable because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this.
Yeah, just real quick, when you mention history, you've got also I was going to say, you've got a couple books here too. Are these in relation to the history, or do you want to talk about this later? Or?
I've got some stuff I can recommend for other stuff. This is going to be a powerful apologetic part. And you know, this are their scriptures. The Kitabi Akdas. Sorry, I'm coughing here.
Yeah.
This is the scriptures. So, you know, I got the Kitabi Igan. These Baha'i books have been translated into many, many languages. So there's 4 important characters in Baha'ism. So you have the Bab, like we said, that's Arabic for gate or door. Yeah, his name was Ali Muhammad, and he was the manifestation before Baha'u'llah. They'll often call him like Sayyid Ali Muhammad or Mirza Ali Muhammad. Sayyid is a Arabic word meaning master or lord. It's used by those who claim to be descendants of Muhammad.
Yeah.
Where Mirza is more like an honorific title like sir. So you often hear, you know, Mirza Ali Muhammad, but his name was Ali Muhammad. So we'll find out who he was in a minute. Baha'u'llah, his name was Hussein Ali Muhammad. Or Nuri, sorry, Hussein Ali Nuri. His name is Arabic for glory of God, as we said. He's the current manifestation. He wrote scripture, and he had 3 wives, but he never met the Bab, the manifestation before him. So those are called the twin manifestations in Baha'i. In Baha'ism, you have 3 central figures. I'll get to that in a sec. Let's not run too far ahead here. So so after the death of Baha'u'llah, he passed on authority to his son, Abdul-Baha. His real name was Abbas Effendi, and his name means servant of glory, like servant of Baha, Abdul-Baha. And he was the son of Baha'u'llah and the second leader in Baha'ism. He was an infallible interpreter of the teachings and the writings of Baha'u'llah. Some of his titles were the Master, the Exemplar, the Mystery of God, and the Center of the Covenant. Mm-hmm. So he had these like real lofty titles. They really revere him. And then his grandson became the next leader, which is Shoghi Effendi. His birth name was Shoghi Rabbani. And he was the grandson, like I said, and the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah. He was appointed as the guardian of the faith in 1921 at the death of Abdul Baha. He was the infallible interpreter of Baha'u'llah. He helped spread the faith around the world a lot. And he did not have any children, so he didn't have a successor. He died in 1957. He didn't leave a will, which is a big no-no in Baha'is. You're supposed to have a will and testament to appoint the next person, and he never did. There was a big controversy about that. So the central figures in Baha'ism, the writings were the central figures were the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha. Mm-hmm. The writings of Baha'u'llah, the Bab, and Abdul Baha are sacred, and the writings of Shoghi Effendi are not sacred, but they're authoritative. But, there's a difference between the four figures. So the history and where it came from is super interesting. So Muhammad, he lived in Arabia from 570 to 632. And when he died, the majority of his followers followed a guy called Abu Bakr. And, he was basically a caliph who was going to, lead the followers. Caliph is Arabic for vicar or successor. And along with three other leaders, they became what they call the rightly guided caliphs in Islam. So during this time, Islam, the centuries during these caliphs, Islam did spread around the world. It went to Iran, where it took root, and other countries. And many of the people there rejected these caliphs, Muhammad's successors, saying, that these people shouldn't be appointed by man, but they should be appointed by God. Yeah. So they kind of had a split in Islam, and it became Shiism, the Shiites. And Shiites, that means separatists, in Arabic. So they rejected the caliphs. Instead, they started believing these imams. So you have the Sunni Muslims and you have the Shiites. So the Sunnis believe in the caliphs, the Shiites believed in the imams. And what happened is the first imam was his name was Ali. He was descendant of Muhammad, and they had basically him and a bunch of other imams. There's like 11 others. They're all violently killed until there was a 12th imam. So after 941, when this Imam Mahdi disappeared, he is said to be continuing to communicate to mankind through his babs, the gates. So he was hidden, and that went on for like 70 years of his occultation. And they said this Imam Mahdi, they created this whole eschatology in Shiite Islam that, one day the Imam Mahdi would return to earth with his faithful 313 followers, and they were also hidden all the time. They never died. So they think this Imam Mahdi figure is still alive for like 1,000 some years. And after the fourth Bab died, this gate, this channel of communication, the succession of the four Babs, there was no way to get communication to Allah, to God, through that. So they've been waiting for like over 1,000 years for the 12th Imam to return. So there's a whole theology in Iran, because a lot of these Shiites are what they call the Twelvers. And one of the beliefs of the Twelvers that God had sent 124,000 sinless prophets to man, like Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. And each of these prophets, they had Muhammad as the final prophet, the seal of Allah, the seal of the prophets. He would, each prophet would, in that time, would come in his own age and bring a book of laws and reveal God to men. Well, that went on, and they had all these different Shia groups, and one of these 12er groups was this heretical Islamic sect called the Shakis, and it was kind of another like cult of Islam. Their followers were
like like the Shakers.
Yeah, the Islamic Sheikh. Yeah. Yeah. So Sheikh Ahmad, he died in 1826. He was a Muslim leader who taught that he was the successor. He was like one of the Babs able to speak, to this Imam Mahdi, this hidden character. Mm-hmm. And he's along with his successor was Sayyid Kazim Rushdie. They were that channel. Well, these two Islamic cultists were called by the title Bab with the, so just like the first four intermediaries back, with the 12th Imam when he was a child who died, they were able to reveal the will of Allah and say that the return of the Imam Mahdi was shortly to appear. So I did say there's a bit of history here, but this stuff's super important. So when the other successor died, Sayyid Kazim, there was a split among the Shaky cult. And one man, he continued to say, well, he was the new, Shaky. The other said, well, he's going to call himself the Bab. And this is the man who would go on to lead the Babi movement, And Bob, by the way, is B-A-B, not like Bob Robert.
Yeah.
That means gate, right?
Yeah.
So he was going to be the forerunner of Baha'u'llah and the manifestation of God for this time. So he wrote about 80 books. The most important was the Bayan, and he wrote in details about laws for this new world order that's supposed to come. He also spoke of he who God will manifest.
Yeah.
So he basically said, as a John the Baptist figure, that even though I'm at the manifestation from God, there's a greater manifestation is about to come. But he did say in his writings it'd be between 1511 years and 2001 years in the future till this other manifestation appear in his Bayan scriptures.
Could I just give a comment real quickly? Because when you're going over a lot of different timelines, is that a lot of times people will, from apologetic standpoints, people will give objections to Christianity just because, well, there's so many Christian denominations. Therefore, Christianity can't be the true religion. But when you look at this, you've got scores, not just the Sunnis and Shias, but even where this came from, there's all these different splintering, fragmentations.
And offshoots.
Not just of Baha'i, but then you have Baha'i offshoots. So
Right.
This is the idea of fragmenting and splintering. This is not something that's just a Christianity issue.
No,
Does that
you
make
had
sense, you know what I mean?
you had the death of Muhammad. You split. The Shias came out, then you had the Shakis come out of there, and then you had, the Bab come out of that as his group, and then it went on to Baha'i. So it's like all these offshoots and offshoots and offshoots. So the government, got involved over there, and they wanted to crush this movement because there was this conflict between these two people, the Shaky successor and the Bab, and after the government, what they did is they executed the Bab in 1850. They thought he was a problem, but he did appoint one of his faithful followers, and his name was Yahya Subiazal, and he was supposed to be the rightly appointed successor of this Bab from this weird cult. Well, what happened is he had a brother who was kind of a better speaker and everything, and that was Hussein Ali Nuri, who became Baha'u'llah. So he basically pulled apart more of the people, and that's how kind of Baha'ism started. So the two groups, they had violent conflicts. A number of men on both sides were murdered in 1868. The Turkish government stepped in, and they sent Hussein Ali, Baha'u'llah, they sent him under house arrest, and he was in a penal colony for a couple of years. And then in 1892, he dies. So that was kind of a lot of the stuff. I know there's a lot of numbers and names and a lot of Arabic, strange-sounding people and Persian people. But
well, it's just important to show that it's very interesting because when I first heard the video of Rainn Wilson on this podcast where he's making the distinction between soul and body, it sounded very Eastern. So it sounded like, oh, he might be like Hindu or something like that. So then when I heard it was Baha'i,
Islamic.
So it's funny because I made the correlation that, well, Baha'i must be an Eastern religion, knowing barely anything about it, just because of the sort of relativistic universalist language that Rainn Wilson was using. But then it goes to show this actually came from Islam, which is very exclusivist.
No
religion.
Reincarnation, none of that
It's
stuff.
fascinating.
It's pretty different.
Yeah.
So I just running through the history real quick. So that, as say, Shoghi Abdul Baha was the authorized interpreter of Baha'u'llah. That was his son. He ruled from 1892 to 1921. Then in 1921, Shoghi Effendi took over, and he ruled to 1957. Didn't have that will, and before he died, he appointed successors to be what they call the hands of the cause. The hands of the cause, or the hands of the cause of God, were custodians who would oversee the protection and propagation of the faith for a few years during the interim period after the guardian Shoghi Effendi suddenly passed away. And then after that, now the Universal House of Justice is the infallible Baha'i leading stuff. So it's amazing how they pick all these successors who are all supposed to be infallible, like Shoghi Effendi, infallible, Abdul Baha, infallible, because they're able to somehow from God interpret the words of Baha'u'llah and his laws and his administration so perfectly for the cause that they have the ability to do that. So if they're not divinely direct, I don't see how this is possible.
Yeah, so we're at the 1920s here, and this is primarily, a lot of this history is really taking place in Iran or in the Middle East. I have heard, I just listened to just a little bit of, I read a little bit of just Walter Martin's segment, just some of his take on the history. What I've stuck out to me was that as they kind of moved over to the West, they kind of utilized the aspects of the persecution that they experienced, and they used it as a way to build empathy with them.
Exactly.
Like, what was sort of the appeal? Did it grow a whole lot?
Well,
or was
Abdul
it
Baha
stagnant?
would come over to America. Shoghi Effendi was trained in English at a university, and he was very, big on the expansion. definitely the empathy thing, but the one world religion, the idea of all men and women be equal, harmony, elimination of prejudice, that's the real hook that gets people in. It's not the theological. It's not like, hey, I've sinned before a God, I need forgiveness. It's more about building, like man building a kingdom on earth almost.
And the appeal to celebrities, was that something that happened organically, or was it something with Scientology, how they had a celebrity center where they sought people out like Travolta?
I don't know if you know this, Jeremiah, but I mean, some celebrities are kind of left-leaning.
No.
It's serious. It's true.
I mean, you're from California, so you wouldn't have any insight about stuff that's left-leaning. If you look at the United States, California is literally leaning to the left,
its own thing.
Which I'm from California too, by the way.
There you go.
I get that. But anyways, yeah, so you're left-leaning, right? So that's part of, and given
it's
that,
the worldview. It's the whole idea of like the whole brotherhood of man,
right,
the oneness of everybody, the multiculturalism, woke, social justice, all of it fits in really well for Baha'i.
Yeah, definitely.
Religion of our times.
Okay. And that would really be the appeal. And so then when it comes to that, maybe is this, I mean, also you think about the organizational structure. Is that,
So
how does that fit into their culture?
The supreme body of authority in Baha'ism is this Universal House of Justice. They have 9 leaders elected every 5 years, and they have an incredible building over there in Israel where they rule. One of the things that's really kind of, some people say it's very hypocritical, is that none of the people who are allowed to be in the House of Justice are women. They have to be men. So one side of the mouth, they're talking about the equality of men and women and their principles, but then how come there's no, really, huh?
Yeah. Well, that was kind of like with like Jim Jones when he was going around, you know, he was in California as well too, like in building in San Francisco, and he had a whole message on racial equality and equality of women, but pretty much his whole governing body were white men, which is just kind of interesting. So a lot of times you'll see groups where it's all rules for thee, not for me, which is also very interesting. But when it comes to organizational structure too, let's just say if I went up to the Baha'i Faith that's over in Scottsdale, I've driven by multiple times, the person who heads it up, you call them the minister, whatever you call them, are they
don't have any clergy.
They don't have any
Baha'i
clergy.
has no clergy.
No clergy. So how would a service operate?
So they basically have over everything. They have Universal House of Justice. Then they have a national spiritual assembly, and they have local spiritual assemblies under that. So that would be the local spiritual assembly over here in Arizona.
Right, but they don't have clergy. Do they have to get sort of licensed?
Volunteers, and they'll start with groups of 9. They always that number 9 comes up all the time. Bahaism. And
what's the uniqueness of that?
Well, how many manifestations is there?
9. Okay.
And it's the number of completion of God. And we'll take a look at some of the calendar stuff in Baha'is. Ask me about that later. But
so biblically, we usually like the 7 tends to show up a lot in biblically, but in Baha'i it's 9 versus 7
and 19.
9 and 19.
19 is huge, but that came from the Bobbies, the Bob cult that they came out of. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. No, continue what you're saying. This is so fascinating.
Yeah. So as far as scriptures, authoritative writings, Baha'u'llah, his books are basically almost like, well, they're pretty much scripture because he was the manifestation
Are any of them
God.
here?
Well, yeah, as I held up, I just have a few of them here. This is, I've got a ginormous library of Baha'i stuff, but the Kitab-i-Aqdas is the most holy book. And we'll talk about the suppression of Baha'i material a bit later. Kitab-i-Aqdan is the Book of Certitude. We'll go over these in a little bit, but this is their most holy book, written in the 1870s.
What would be the most, if you're going to compare it to any book of the Bible, are these like historical narratives, or these like Paul's epistles?
No, more about
doctrine?
No, more about laws and, you know, some of the stuff meant for the New World Order.
Okay, so very like Torah-ish.
Islamic Hadithi. Maybe kind of more like that kind of flavor, yeah. It has a real Arabic flavor, kind of a Muslim flavor, even though they're going to say they're not Muslim, but there's a lot of similarities with Islam.
Okay.
A lot. So, yeah, so any of the writings Baha'u'llah, that's the most holy book, and, you know.
So it's kind of like Tex-Mex, or just it's a mix of both, right?
Maybe.
Okay. First thing goes, I'm kind of hungry, I need some food soon, but anyways. Yeah, so you have this, and you have the different scriptures that are just this sort of
and their
mixture.
Unique beliefs.
Yeah, the unique beliefs that come from that. And so how does that, what else do they adhere to as far as his teachings, or are there current sort of continuing revelations on top of that, kind of like how Mormonism has a Book of Mormon?
No, because we don't have the Mormons as current presidents, but Baha'u'llah said there would not be another leader for 1,000 years.
Okay.
So he's the current manifestation for God. There's be more. So let's go over some of the beliefs there. We've talked about, 919. We've talked about that a few times. There's symbols of 9-pointed star. There's no such thing as evil in Baha'ism. There's only an absence of good. I know. Let that sink in for a second. I know. I can see the look on your face.
That would probably put a big conflict of interest for any of Rainn Wilson's outcries against any injustice in the world, because he talks about that. I listened to a little bit of his book Soul Boom on Audible, and just from what I listened to, that seems to be would be problematic.
Well, what Baha'is say is that man is basically good, and he needs to fix himself by education, and it's basically moral improvement, self-reformation, basically by doing good and doing a lot of the Baha'i rituals. But that's it. So there's no sinful nature. There's not even such a thing as evil anyway. So Satan's not a personal being. Satan's just basically man's lower nature. As far as God's concerned, they held a very Islamic kind of God. God is like a Unitarian God of one person. He's unknowable in his essence. So that's kind of like out of Islam. The real center of Baha'ism is to understand the idea of manifestations. So they believe in progressive revelation. You've seen those coexist bumper stickers, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of that flavor a little bit, but you think more of like the Indian parable. They don't use this, but it kind of fits more the Indian parable, the elephant, the 6 blind men.
Yeah.
So, these 6 blind men went to the elephant. They started feeling the elephant.
Yeah.
And one of them says, hey, it feels like a wall because he's feeling the side of the elephant. Another one's feeling the tusk and he goes, this feels like a spear. Another one is feeling the trunk. He said, no, this is not, it doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like a snake. And another one's grabbing its leg. No, it feels like a tree to me. And another one said, grabbing the ear, said it's a fan. Or the one grabbing the tail said it's a rope. So this is kind of like mankind. We're all trying to understand God, but we're all touching the elephant in different ways. So whether you're a Buddhist or whether you're a Muslim or a Zoroastrian, Zoroaster, by the way, was a leader, Zarathustra, in Persia, and he was supposedly a prophet. It's a smaller group. There's a few, temples around, but so they believe all these are people from God, kind of like that. So like we said before, he's got, it's wrong for you to think your religion's special in any way. Don't think Christianity's special any more than any other religion. You need to understand how God works. He sends these different leaders and these different cycles or dispensations. Like I said, they have Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah. Those are the 9 manifestations. And then they talk about some of these smaller manifestations around too.
Now, in regards to Jesus, and you're talking about everybody has, this always fascinates me too. There's a book I really enjoy called Putting Jesus in His Place.
Yeah.
In it, like the opening segment of this chapter, he says everybody has to have Jesus on their team, which is always interesting. Like you can have
Walter Martin would call him the calling card of the cults, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with any other world leader. Like Muhammad doesn't show up in every other religion. Like there's no other religious figure that does that. But Jesus, you have to do something with
Jesus
him
somewhere. Yeah.
So when it comes to the Baha'i, do they think he was a real historical figure?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so they'll acknowledge the historicity.
We'll in our response, we'll definitely go through who they say Jesus is and a lot of that stuff. They say the best way to explain the manifestations of Baha'i, they say like God is like the sun, and the reflection in the mirror is like the manifestations. You're not really, seeing God in His glory, but you're seeing the rays of the sun in the mirror. They use that all the time. Yeah.
And also, you may have mentioned this before, but you've given it so information. So I feel like, whenever we're doing this episode, I might have to listen to it a couple times to take everything, which it's always awesome to have all this study that you've done and just get it out there. But just the name Baha'i, like, what is that?
Follower Baha'u'llah, follower of glory. So someone who's a follower of Baha'u'llah is a Baha'i.
Okay. Follower of Baha'u'llah, who was the
is the current manifestation of the 9 manifestations. He's the current manifestation that we need to follow.
Okay.
So Jesus is obsolete. Muhammad kind of made him obsolete, and then
Baha'i,
the Bab took over.
Baha'u'llah.
Yeah, he was like he was like so 4 prophets ago. Jesus, he was like so yesterday. So it was like Jesus, and they got replaced by Muhammad, and then Muhammad got replaced by the Bab, and then now it's Baha'u'llah. And then it's 1,000 years later, so Baha'u'llah is like the prophet of the day, the flavor of the week,
So if we're going to use modern day tech terms, Baha'i would see the most current iPhone. Jesus to them would be an iPhone.
Not to be irreverent to them.
Yeah, of course.
We're not trying to insult them.
Using a correlation.
But just use an analogy. Yeah.
Jesus would be like an iPhone 4S.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's it. So we can maybe, do a little cartoon thingy of this. Yep.
Okay.
I was thinking also we need to maybe have this game on the show where every time we mention Walter Martin, we have a shot, right? His name comes up because he knows everything so well. So as far as the manifestations, they're very different than humans, like regular humans. They're not divine, they're not God, but they're all sinless. So that means, do the math. That means not only Baha'u'llah was sinless, Buddha was sinless, Moses was sinless, Muhammad was sinless. They're all sinless. They say all the prophets, and they all lived in a pre-existence. So that's an interesting thought because, didn't Moses kill an Egyptian and bury him in the sand? Didn't Muhammad kill people by the edge of the sword? There's so many arguments against some of these previous, and there's actually apologetic books by Baha'is showing how, no, you're misunderstanding. They never really sinned. All the manifestations of God are sinless because Baha'u'llah said so.
Okay.
So it's pretty wild. You're not allowed to show the prophets' faces, the manifestations' faces. That's a lot like Islam too, where you're not allowed to show what Muhammad looks like. So, when there's movies about the Bab or Baha'u'llah, you can't show his face.
Interesting.
You can't reproduce the face. Now, there's two pictures that we have, old black and white pictures, like a passport photo. It's like a Baha'u'llah, and, they don't even like you posting those pictures.
Would that be the same thing with images of Jesus? With Baha'i?
No, yeah, they probably say the same thing, but I didn't understand the question. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you're not supposed to show the faces of the manifestations.
That's very interesting. I know that, for example, there's certain Christians who have convictions about images of Christ, whether it's a second commandment or 2CV. That could be a whole nother can of worms.
It is.
But it would just be interesting to see that if they believe that, it would be from a very different reason. The same sense where if they're saying that Jesus is sinless, it's not because of Scripture is the authority where it comes from. That it's because Baha'u'llah said so.
And it comes out of Islam. There's a lot of things we'll see that, since it had that Islamic roots, it kind of has those similarities, these things.
So really, just one last thing before you jump in here. So really when it comes down to authority, the position of authority, ultimately, for someone who's Baha'i, is because Baha'u'llah said so.
Yeah, basically, he's like the current manifestation for today.
Okay,
you're not supposed to follow Jesus.
Okay,
in one sense, they could say, like I said, it's one side of the mouth. Yeah, you can be a Christian in a Baha'i or a Hindu in a Baha'i, but you're not supposed to be because Baha'u'llah is the prophet for today.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and the next one, as I said, is supposed to be 1,000 years from now. So there's just so many contradictions behind it.
Almost 1,000 years from now, it takes the pressure off of having to get continued revelation. That's always good.
So, moving on to Jesus. So how do Baha'is see Jesus? Well, they say that all the biblical prophecies about Jesus in the Bible have been fulfilled in Baha'u'llah. He is the second coming of Christ. So he literally is. And they kind of say this for all religions. So just like the Jews are looking for Messiah or Islam is looking for the 12th Imam, well, it's all been filled in Baha'u'llah. Buddhism is looking for Lord Maitreya to come back. That's Baha'u'llah. Or the 10th incarnation of Vishnu, the 10th avatar in Hinduism, that's him. Zoroastrians are looking for the world saver Shah-Baram. That's also Baha'u'llah. So he's like the fulfillment of all these kind of, eschatological figures that different religions are waiting for.
So in other words, if I'm having a conversation with someone who's of the Baha'i faith and say we're talking about the Advent, if you're talking about defining terms in the language barrier, if I'm talking about that, from their perspective, they would think that I'm truly longing for the manifestation of Baha'u'llah. I'm just looking to the advent of Christ in his place.
It's already happened.
Right.
It's done. Baha'u'llah, like when it talked about the spirit of truth, like the spirit of truth is going to come. Shinshang-ji, we did an episode on that. They say that's Li Man-he, and Muslims say that's Muhammad.
Yeah.
The spirit of truth is coming. That's Baha'u'llah. He's the comforter. So, there's a lot of Baha'i writers, like William Sears wrote a book called Thief in the Night, and actually that's the book that got Dizzy Gillespie converted. There's Michael Sowers, there's Gary Matthews, no relation, but these guys have all written books trying to prove how the fulfillment of Baha'u'llah is the fulfillment of the second coming of Christ already. It's a done deal. So as far as Jesus, why did Jesus come? That's a really good question in Baha'is. So they say that the only reason he came was to do one thing. Here's a quote from Abdul Baha. The purpose of the appearance of the manifestations of God is the training of the people. That is the result of their mission, the real outcome. The outcome of the whole life of Jesus was the training of the 11 disciples and 2 women. I'll read that again. The outcome of the whole life of Jesus was the training of the 11 disciples and 2 women. He didn't come to die. He came to teach his moral upgrade of teaching. Why did he suffer troubles, ordeals, and calamities? For the training of these few followers. This was a result of his life. The product of the life of Christ was not the churches, but the illuminated souls of those who believed in him. Afterwards, they spread his teachings.
Just real quick, just a quick commentary. It's almost, if you're going to make it off of that, you'd have to say that Jesus was not the greatest teacher, because how many times in the New Testament do you see Jesus explaining something to his disciples and they are clueless? They have no clue. Right. And then he goes up and he does the transfiguration, and basically how they respond to it, Jesus responds by saying, "Get behind me, Satan."
Exactly.
So if that's the goal of it, then there's a huge communication barrier between Jesus and the disciples from the,
But you see how it takes away from our Christian view, because if to us, why did Jesus come? He died to lay down his life as a ransom for many. And he gave his life. For God so loved the world, he gave his son. It's for us to have eternal life. And for Baha'i, no, he just came to teach.
Yeah.
So as far as the resurrection is concerned, they say that Jesus did not rise bodily from the dead. A lot of people get this wrong when they talk about Baha'is. They think he raises an invisible spirit creature like Jehovah's Witnesses. They basically say that Jesus didn't raise physically from the dead, but his teachings caught on. They suddenly went 3 days later and, oh, that's what he meant. So here's another quote from Some Answered Questions, pretty famous Baha'i book. We say that the meaning of Christ's resurrection is as follows. The disciples are troubled and agitated after the martyrdom of Christ. So he was a good teacher who didn't come to die for your sins. He was a martyr. Again, majorly contradicting Scripture and the words of Jesus himself. The reality of Christ, which signifies his teaching, his bounties, his perfections, and his spiritual power, was hidden and concealed for 2 or 3 days after his martyrdom, and was not resplendent and manifest. No, rather it was lost, for the believers were few in number and troubled and agitated. The cause of Christ was like a lifeless body. And when after 3 days the disciples became assured and steadfast and began to serve the cause of Christ and resolved to spread the divine teachings, putting his counsel in the practice and rising to serve him, his religion found life, his teachings and his admonitions became evident and visible. In other words, the cause of Christ was like a lifeless body until the life and the bounty of the Holy Spirit surrounded it. So basically, they kind of said, oh, now we understand. That was the resurrection. It resurrected spiritually in their mind, their understanding what Baha'u'llah was teaching for that time. What Jesus was teaching all that time. They never got the resurrection. So
they would adhere to then a spiritual resurrection, but not the physical resurrection.
Absolutely.
So
it's not a resurrection of spirit. It's the fact that it resurrected in the consciousness of the followers when they understood what he's been talking about for all that time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, too, that they would adhere in some sense to the historicity of Jesus, but once it comes to the resurrection, it's almost their pre-commitments. All of a sudden, they have to sort of mold history in its image in concordance to their pre-commitments.
Well, they really have a low view of it. Yeah, they have a low view of it. Like Baha'u'llah's son, he was up on a roof and he fell through a skylight and he fell and landed on this wooden crate and he was killed. Like he was punctured through the crate and he died. And Baha'u'llah equivocated that to the death of Jesus, that his son died like that. And he even said that he even offered up as a ransom for the regeneration of the world and the unification of its peoples. That's how he talked about his son dying. He made that like a ransom for the world. So they don't have a concept of Jesus being God, obviously. He was just a manifestation, none of them are divine. He came here just as a teacher, not to give his life as a ransom for many. They deny his resurrection. They deny, evil and everything, why you would need a resurrection, the conquest of evil. And they deny, they just kind of make light of his purpose of dying. It's a pretty different view than Christianity.
Wow.
So they're very spiritualized hermeneutic. They don't take anything literal. And one of the big problems, I was going to mention later, but I can mention it now, is when Baha'is kind of have this idea that, Baha'u'llah now is the new manifestation, they become de facto infallible experts on all other world religions. So now that you understand, like he's the manifestation, Buddha and Krishna and Zoroaster all before him, we don't know our Bible as well. The Baha'i current manifestation is the real interpreter of what the Bible is, what the Quran was, the Zend-Avesta of, Zoroaster. So basically, they become like the divine interpreters of all the religions, where we have to listen to Baha'u'llah. We don't even know our own religions properly. We have to take his word for what the Bible really was teaching that we were missing. So it's pretty mind-blowing. Yeah, so in other words, in one of the episodes we covered, with you before with Shin-Chan-Ji, in other words, what you're kind of looking at then is in the same way how he sort of took revelation, molded it to its liking, they're basically taking
it's a world religions class, but it's
fitting it all in.
But it's fitting it all in, but molding it in the image of,
and taking certain parts
Baha'u'llah.
literally, certain parts figuratively, where it supports their context. Mostly figurative. They totally have. They take figurative interpretations of Bible. We talk about the historical grammatical method and hermeneutics, and you understand the intent of the author and what they were trying to communicate. They throw that all out the window.
Yeah.
As long as it can fit in with what Baha'u'llah was trying to say.
Yeah. And so just real quickly, as we kind of are sort of starting to wrap up part 1 here. In part 2, we're going to go more into the apologetic sort of response. Maybe you'll get to those too, when you think about like salvation and how does that work in relation to Baha'i? Is there a point where you have somebody who is Buddhist who's seeking reincarnation? We look at Christians, we're looking at glorification.
Yeah, you know what?
How does that fit
we'll
in?
take a look. I think this is going to take enough time that next week we can maybe pick up with their view of life after death. They have a whole view of where man go, who man is, what man's problem is, and where he's going to go after death. It's a group that's been around for a while. They've got a lot of literature, a lot of teachings, and it takes a bit of time to go through. A religion that's been around 100-something years.
I'm sure there's more, even before you have here. I'm sure there's a lot more that could even expand upon this for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what other thoughts do you have, kind of giving an overview of the Baha'i faith? I mean, I know for me, I'm probably going to give this a couple listens, like I said, when this comes out, because this has been so informative. What else is really important for our audience to understand as we kind of in the final parts of this episode?
Kind of like I said, where people become Baha'is for emotional reasons. They don't become Baha'is for intellectual reasons. It's almost like a big social club. They're trying to build a kingdom man on earth. They're not looking for a sovereign God's redemptive plan where he invades time and space to save man. But as opposed, they're just kind of building their own utopia on the world through love, harmony, equality, that kind of thing. And there's no sense of, it's a very shallow kind of spirituality to me, in a sense.
Yeah.
They're going to argue and say they got the deepest thing going, but especially philosophically, there's not much meat in the bones.
Okay, so it's very broad, very, very emotional, very experiential. But when you start looking at the internal consistencies, that's where it starts to fall apart. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about.
If it's Mormons, they say, "Oh, we're all about the family."
Yeah.
See, that's why we're a great religion. That's why we're these guys. We're all about humanity, and I'm like wider than the family. We want to bring you into the fold, to love on everybody, kumbaya, and then.
So instead of families are forever, it's like humanity is forever.
Pretty much.
We are the world.
That bumper sticker.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So in other words, it's sort of like it makes sense. All right. Well, this has been really good. So if you have enjoyed this, definitely, where can people find out more about you? I know you have a website in the making,
and a podcast, examiningthecults.com, and we're going to have a dedicated site going through a lot of the teachings and problems in Baha'ism, which we're going to hit hard next episode. But yeah, that's all going to be on examiningthebaha'is.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. And if you guys have enjoyed part 1 of this episode, definitely let us know what you thought. And we will talk to you all in part 2, where we examine the Baha'i faith on Cultish, where we enter into the kingdom of the cults. Talk to you guys soon.